All right, guys, welcome back to the Hypnos channel. I'm here with my close friend, Alex. He has his own soccer podcast called Post to Post, and I'm really thrilled to be talking some Hull City football with him. A lot of new stuff going on with the club, new owners, new players, old players leaving, new faces. Really excited to get into it. But really quickly, Alex, do you want to talk a little bit about what your own podcast is? Check it out on podcasts and Spotify.
Absolutely, and thanks for having me. Cool opportunity here with this channel, and yeah, post to post, it's relatively new. I think I recorded my first episode not too long ago, and so basically, what it is, it's a soccer show or football show, but I'm a huge Spurs fan, huge Tottenham fan, so it'll be at least one episode a week that's solely focused on Spurs. But look, if you're looking for just bits and pieces of major transfer news, at least during the summer, just conversation. Obviously, a lot of Spurs stuff. Feel free to check it out.
For sure, for sure. I know you talked about the Richarlison signing in your most recent podcast. That was great. And then you're also just going to be like touching on global soccer stuff. So it doesn't always have, it's not going to have all whole Tottenham content. He's going to talk about a lot of cool stuff. So make sure you check that out on Spotify and on podcasts on your iPhone. And then I will drop both of those links in the YouTube description. So make sure you check that out. He's doing me a great favor coming on to talk about Hull City. But without further ado, let's jump into what the club's been up to lately. Obviously, we just got the news that we stayed into the championship. Obviously, had enough points to stay up. That's really big for us. Obviously, we got promoted about 2 years ago, so it was our first year in the championship in a while, and we got to stay up. Previously, we'd been sent down into the third division. So being able to stay up in the championship is big. Obviously, it gives us a lot more TV revenue, a lot more profits. You're able to do a lot more stuff. And then obviously new owners. Salam is finally out. A hated owner from the population for many years. And we have our new Turkish owner who is really passionate to put his own stamp on the football club, which kind of leads us into our first talking point, which is our second transfer signing of the summer window was Ozan Tufan, who, if you don't know him, is a central midfielder. He played in the Turkish top tier league, the Super League, played there for a while, and then he got loaned out to Watford this year. And he was having a really good career before he gets loaned out to Watford. A lot of transfer statistics placed his value around 9 million euros. He goes to Watford. And how does he do, Alex? He doesn't really pan out at Watford.
Not a fantastic spell for him. If I recall correctly, six or so appearances.
Yeah,
Some of
six
whom
or seven appearances.
were off the bench. So,
Mhm, mhm.
breaking into that starting 11 at Watford, obviously, who, if you're not familiar, were relegated this season from the Premier League, didn't have a great season. And, one could argue he wasn't really put into he wasn't really put into a situation to succeed. He wasn't put in the
Sure.
right, um, you know, situation.
Yeah, for
Where he
sure. For sure. Obviously, with a relegated club like Watford, there's going to be turnover. When you're relegated, the organization really isn't clicking on all cylinders. However, no goals, no assists for a central midfielder. The stats didn't really come to fruition. Reports that he was overweight definitely came up at the loan spell. And we're able to get him for about 3.4 euros. So his stock takes a very big hit. Alex, do you think he'll be able to adjust to the championship easier than the Premier League? Obviously, one of the top leagues, very different from Turkey's top league, is the English top league. Will the championship be a more natural kind of flow for him?
I think he'll do well in the championship, and I think while the physicality is similar, definitely for the Premier League, the quality isn't right. It's a little, it's a drop off, right? Being the second division, and I think having had that brief spell with Watford, he's familiar with English football. I think he's become more acclimated to just kind of the culture in the country. I think his English is solid at this point, which is obviously really important for a player coming from another country. And I think
Mhm.
he'll bed in well. I think is a good opportunity for him.
Yeah, in the comfort with obviously he is a Turkish-born player, aspires to play for the Turkish national team. I believe he had a couple caps when he was younger, but he's able to come in and play for a Turkish owner. That's going to offer a lot more familiarity for him. The only question is this a bargain or did we overpay here a little, Alex? I know we were talking about before the podcast. I kind of went with I thought we overpaid for him a little bit just because how rough he did at Watford. Obviously, we talked about tough situation, but I thought 3.4 euros was a little bit of an overpay. You thought we got him for a little bit of a bargain. Would you want to weigh in on that a little bit? Bargain or overpay? What do you think?
It's a tricky one. I, came into this thinking that it was sort of a bargain in the sense that, his value did depreciate massively after that spell
Yeah,
in
yeah,
Watford. You mentioned it was like hovering around 7 to 11 million pounds,
yeah,
or something like
exactly.
that before that
Mhm.
spell. And so to get him, for around 3.4 to 4, now it, I still think it's somewhat of a bargain. However, there's a risk there, right? And that's kind of what you were talking about, getting a player, coming from the Turkish league who obviously didn't perform very well in the Premier League. There's a risk, and so to pay that type of sum, as a championship club, it's a lot, right? And so we'll see how he does, and ultimately, time will tell.
That was my big worry. Obviously, there's some Keane Lewis-Potter news that we're going to get into later in the podcast. There should be money coming into the club. But if you're a championship club, what can you do with that 3.4 million euros? I feel like there's a little bit of the owner reaching for a Turkish midfielder, someone he likes, someone he thinks has experience. But there's a lot you can do with 3.4 million euros. You can go in the third division, find a lot of other players. You can invest in your young academy. That's how we got Jared Bowen. That's how we got Keane Lewis-Potter. Obviously, amazing players. Jared Bowen just made his first England cap international, which was great. So I feel like personally for me, I feel like there's so much more you can do with that money than I want to say take a gamble on a 27-year-old Turkish player who played well in the Turkish Super League. Don't get me wrong. There's great reports of him in the Turkish league, but when he came over to play English football, which is very different, it just didn't pan out. So you're taking a gamble here on a player who's not proven, and there's so many different avenues you could have gone. Obviously, we don't know the conversations, were there other transfers involved, but I feel like with that kind of money in the championship, you might be better off pocketing it or investing it in someone else. So what do you think about that Turkish connection, maybe reaching for a player here to get that Turkish blood, get a little bit of a stamp on the team from the owner? Do you think that was the right call or what do you think, Alex?
From what I've read just about the new ownership, I think there's definitely a lot of capital being put into the club, which I think is fantastic news for Hull City fans. And you were mentioning
Yeah.
how, that money maybe could have gone elsewhere. I think there is additional funds to, really help build the infrastructure of the club with the youth academy, for
Mhm.
example.
Mhm.
And really trying to get back to that elite level, right? Because I'm sure the goal is to get back in the Premier League, right? And I
Yes.
think
Yeah.
that's the new owner's aspiration. I was reading about the new kit sponsor,
Mhm. Yeah.
Corendon, which is of course a Turkish airline, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
as
yeah.
you said, really trying to put the stamp on the club, which is
Exactly.
something that a few owners have tried to do in the past, which I think is kind of interesting to keep track of. But I think the funds are there. So
Yeah, for sure. That has been the one thing where we sold Jared Bowen and we sold Camille Gruzitsky to Millwall for about 1 million. We sold Bowen for upwards of 20 million to West Ham. And we kind of looked around and we went, well, where's this money coming from? It turns out we needed that money to stay afloat so we wouldn't go under and we wouldn't go into financial troubles like other championship teams like Wigan Athletic had their own financial troubles. So you don't want to be the fan who's complaining that we're spending money. I'm thrilled we're making signings. There is just that little voice in the back of my head who says, is this the right signing? Time will tell. I do personally think it was a bit of an overpay, but I think I'm very happy we're making signings. I'm very happy there's money coming into the club, like you said. And if we pivot on to another signing we made, which I think was a bargain, which really gets me excited is Tobias Figueiredo. It's tough to say his last name. He's Portuguese, but compared to Turfan, I'm really excited about this signing. What can you tell us about Tobias, Alex?
So promising Portuguese youth player.
Mhm.
Obviously he's older now. He's
Yeah,
28 now, I believe, and so
yeah,
he
yeah,
has caps with the Port, or he had caps with the Portuguese under 21 team, which
yeah.
is a sign of being a promising young player. Apologies for
Center
the
back.
vacuum in the background. But he comes in, I want to say, on a free transfer or at least for a bargain after having
Yeah,
some
we
time at
paid
Forest.
1.6 million euros for him from Nottingham Forest.
And I think that's a good deal. He spent time in English football,
Exactly.
an experienced player at this point. I think he'll be a solid piece. I think in the defense for you guys. So this
Yeah.
is definitely, like you said, it's an exciting signing.
I love this personally because all the negatives we're looking at for Turfan compared to Tobias, they're like the complete opposite. Turfan didn't really pan out in the Premier League, in the English league. But you look at Tobias, Nottingham Forest, just raving reviews about him. He went out there from a loan spell from Sporting CP in Portugal, top team in Portugal. And the loan spell went so well in Nottingham Forest, they decided they wanted to keep him, sign him to a 4-year deal. And he's just a really solid player for him. Obviously, as a center back, you're not always going to be in the headlines compared to attackers. But from what I'm gathering is just a really solid piece. And to be able to get him for 1.6 million euros, which is obviously no small fee, but compared to the Turfan signing, I'm just a much bigger fan of this, especially to give some experience in the back end. We've obviously got Jacob Greaves is the other center back, kind of a younger player that everyone loves, young stud, but we're able to get an experienced player back there who's really able to kind of help our back end. Alex, if you want to talk about maybe a little bit just how important is the back end. A lot of teams like to build through the back, invest in the back four, and then you can go and find that number 9, that striker. How important are those center back positions to a ball club?
Here in the U.S., we say defense wins championships, right?
Yep. Yep.
And it goes for football as well. In the sense, obviously, you guys know what football I'm talking about. But it really does provide that platform. If you think about just, I don't know if anyone's played like, football like a amateur level, right? How important the defense is in just kind of being able to have any sort of possession or being able to, obviously, be able to win games, right? And it definitely applies professionally as well. Issues with the defense are often what take teams down. In the sense that conceding goals, it's never good. You can only do so much by scoring, and you really need to be able to keep clean sheets in order to be a good team. And I think this, signing this center back is a good signing. Also for depth,
Yep.
because Hull City, having played, I believe, a back three for a majority
Mhm.
of last season,
Yep. Yep.
having as many center backs for those 3 center back positions as possible is great.
For sure. For sure. With Grant McCann coming, being sacked, bringing in a new manager, it's going to be very interesting to see what the new manager kind of wants. I really hope his fingerprints are over these signings. I love the fact that, or the idea that the manager would come in and be like, yes, get me a great solid center back. Obviously, you're going to put him to use next to Jacob Greaves. So that's what I really hope for with this signing. And like I referenced before, I just think when you have a pedigree of being able to make it and survive, I know it's the championship, it wasn't the Premier League, but just to be able to have a successful stint in English football in Nottingham Forest, it makes me as a fan and as a bystander to these transfer fees, it makes you feel better about them compared to Turf fan where you're saying well, he didn't pan out before. Why is he going to pan out now? You can reference the Turkish owner, the new manager, how good he's going to be, but there's a pedigree to Tobias that I really like and I really enjoy. So those are the two big signings we've made so far in the transfer window. We have a couple more targets we're going to talk about towards the end, but the biggest rumor that's been swirling around Hull City is the almost completed, pretty close to done Keane Lewis-Potter moved to Brentford for around 20 million euros. That's the number that's been given. Obviously, we don't have the exact details. If you don't know, I'm sure you do. Keane Lewis-Potter, an absolute stud. He's gonna kill it in the Premier League. We're all very excited for him. Came up through the Hull City Academy. Great player. What does this transfer fee indicate, Alex? I feel like what are we going to be able to do with that kind of money?
It is big money. I
Yeah.
think if I'm not if I researched accordingly, this is going to be the most expensive, or has the possibility to be the most expensive departure um from Hull in their history.
Yeah,
And so
right up to Jared Bowen. They're pretty close. They're going to be, yeah,
exactly. And I think with that type of money, with the ambition as well, right? Because money and ambition, those two go together, right? If you
Mhm.
really want to be successful, and with the ambition of the new owners, and obviously this money, I think,
Yeah.
a lot more, important signings can be expected to be made in this window. And I think, I don't know if a push for promotion is, the aspiration for all this season, but
Mhm.
I mean, it's not
Yeah,
far away, I think.
I agree. I agree. Definitely, you can take that 20 million euros and you can make a splash. Um, Obviously, you're going to have to replace him.
Mhm.
So whether that's going to be in the academy, whether that's going to be another signing, only time will tell. It is going to be losing a big piece in our front three, obviously, but I want to see that money placed to replace him and then fill other holes. Obviously, I think we're set at goalkeeper. We've got a great goalkeeper. Obviously, made a couple signings at center back. I would like to see another midfielder, get another attacker to replace Keane Lewis-Potter. But this kind of money is kind of like monumental, especially considering the fact it was going to happen, right? So obviously, the deal's not done yet. Brentford, nothing's completely done. Talks do fall through. But if it's not Brentford, someone else is going to pick them up for that same kind of money. You've got a young player here who eventually they just can't stay in Hull City. We're not going to be able to pay what their wages will command. We're not going to be able to turn down that kind of money. And obviously, you want to do what's best for the player. The player wants to play in the Premier League. That's their dream. So you want to do right by the young academy kid you've had. So you want to send him along to Brentford. And obviously, I think it's going to be hard to see him go, but Hull City fans have become the news has. We thought we were going to lose him in the December transfer window, in the winter transfer window. So the fact we were able to hang on to him and then still get a good fee is good. Um, but it shows how important the academy is, right? So you have two $20 million academy sales. Just how like crucial is an academy to a big club like Tottenham and a smaller club like Hull City? Obviously, just to bring up a few before you answer that: Harry Maguire, Jared Bowen, Keane Lewis-Potter. I
Mhm.
mean, those are huge money signings all coming through the academy. How important is that to a ball club?
I think Andrew Robertson, I don't know if he actually
Yeah,
came through the Hall Academy, but he was a young
yeah.
player, right?
Another
He
young
was,
player we had. Yeah, I don't believe he was in the academy, but yeah,
Mhm.
another great player for Liverpool.
Absolutely. And I think this is something I like to talk about a lot. This is something I've talked about on my show. Youth Academy, I guess this is an example, right? So I play a lot of FIFA career mode and a lot of
Mhm.
football manager. It's the first
Yeah,
thing I do. The first
yeah,
thing I do is make sure I have good scouts and just kind of take a look at the players in the academy, because that is
yeah,
really how you know, from a financial point of view, that's how can ensure that you're going to be fine. And it's also like, you look at the types of models, especially with big clubs. Like I'm a Spurs fan, right? But we look
yeah.
at some of our peer clubs. We look at clubs like, Man City, they have a great youth academy as well. But you look at their model, and a lot of their expenditure as a club is on these big players and these transfer fees. And
Mhm.
so, I mean, it just makes sense, right? It's logical if you can, cultivate these young players, kind of ingrain the values, like whether it be, the resilience that's embodied possibly by like the working class community that your club is like a part of, right? If you can ingrain that, and obviously the talent as well, right?
For
And if
sure.
you can just kind of cultivate that without having to spend a transfer fee, and then sell on value, it's great.
I mean, every player who plays football is going to come up in an academy, and like you see bigger, not Tottenham level clubs, or I mean close, but you see clubs like Monaco, and they like They do a great job bringing Mbappe up, and then they get paid handsomely for it. You see RB Leipzig, I believe, right? Bring up Erling Haaland, and they get paid handsomely for it. And then Dortmund does a great job at the next level. You see Jude Bellingham goes to Dortmund, kills it. He was obviously in the championship for bringing him, I believe.
Birmingham,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So if you can develop, and then Bringingham got 20 mil from Dortmund, I believe. If you can develop your players, you're going to get a handsome fee from a bigger end club who, like you said, like a Man City, has the money to spend. They obviously want to develop their own players, but if they have the money, it's just easy for them to, boom, pay that 60 mil and then get a instant impact player. But if the academy clubs put in the work and they develop their players, they're going to get just massive profits, which just helps you succeed throughout. So I think Keane Lewis-Potter is another great example of how you can get massive, massive profits and success from your young academy. What I want to talk about a little bit is we mentioned how you want to do right by the player, you want to send him out. However, it's interesting. Do you think they should have kept him or should try to keep him? I mean, like I said, I feel like they'd be calling all day. Keane Lewis Potter's agent would be like, hey, he wants to play in the Premier League, like get him out. Um, should we have fought a little harder to keep him? What do you think?
I mean, I think like you said earlier, he's a player. Obviously, he's English as well. And that's
Mhm.
huge, right? I think he has
Yeah.
caps for the U19s, and I think earlier this summer he played for the U21s,
Yeah.
which is an honor, right?
Yeah.
Especially for a championship player,
Yeah.
to be in consideration for that. And I think the move was going to happen eventually. I think now is a good time, especially given the new ownership and kind of they're already showing they're willing to splash
Yeah.
the cash a little bit, right?
For sure.
And I think now is a decent enough time to accept the fact that there are going to be clubs coming in with money, right?
Yeah.
Brentford, it's a lot of
Yeah.
money. And I
A lot
think
of money. Yeah.
now is a good time to sell.
Yeah. I like it. I agree. So on the topic of players leaving, obviously Keane Lewis Potter was a big name. Um, People not at Hull City kind of know that name. Big player leaving in the championship. Another kind of series of small people leaving who Hull City people really know is Tom Huddlestone leaving. Tom Eves is leaving, Richie Smallwood. And then the one we want to talk about is George Honeyman, our captain, kind of an undersized midfielder, kind of came up from the ground and really just came up from Sunderland, really played well there, earned his way into the first team. Hull City purchased him. I thought it was a great purchase at the time. Struggles to get his footing, comes up in the third division, plays great, or excuse me, earns the captain's armband for the second division. We stay up, and then you sell him to Millwall for, I'll have to double check here, but it is 1.35 million euros. We bought him for about 900,000 from Sunderland. And so you see that flip, you see that little bit of profit. 400,000 euros is nothing to scoff at. Don't get me wrong, but you see what he did for the club. You see that he's a captain. He's a fan favorite. He's a gritty, great midfielder. What's the thought process behind letting him go a little bit? It's tough to go into what the club was thinking, but in your best opinion, what do you think we're thinking there when you sell a fan favorite for a little profit?
From what I've read, there were going to be midfielders brought in the summer. We've seen that with Tufan.
Obviously, yeah, Turfan, yeah,
And there's gonna be more competition for places in the midfield. And I think if I'm right, this is a great guy we're talking about, great character guy, obviously a solid player as well. However, he's coming to the end of his contract
yeah,
this summer, and
yeah,
so I've read he had the option to extend. It's a little bit like a sign and trade in the NBA in the sense
interesting,
that
interesting,
he kind of signs that, or he signs for that extra year, which is written into his contract as an
mhm,
option, just so that the club can get some
so we
sort of
can
sell
get
on value for
value,
him, right?
yeah,
And so I think that's why the value is so low, because I'm sure he's, as a player, he's valued for more than that. I think it's a great deal for Millwall. But I think competition for places in the squad maybe was a factor. Um, but yeah, I mean, an important player for the club, so I'm sure that stings a little bit.
I agree. That's what I really liked. Alex did point that out before the podcast. I was kind of scratching my head when the news came out when I'm looking at it. But like in other sports, there's kind of like um, people know you're trying to get rid of this player, right? So whatever the reasons were, want to bring in new midfielders, too much competition, want to make a little bit of profit. Like we said, that's a 50% profit on our original investment, which is still very good. But like Alex said, you only have a certain amount of time to sell him and get value. And Millwall and these other clubs know it. So whether his value was 3 million euros or whatever you want it to be, they can kind of undercut that price and say, well, this is the best offer you're going to get because everyone knows you want to sell them. And we're not going to pay any more because his value may be 3 million, but right now, because he's going to be out of contract and you don't want to lose him for nothing, his value is only 1 million euros. So I think that's a really good point. This is not our ownership's fault. This is kind of the past ownership's fault for what kind of contract he was on, not re-signing him for longer, putting in that team option only for 1 year. Maybe it should have been for 2 years, whatever you want. This is just kind of the team they inherited. And like I said before, I think there is also that the owner wants to put his own stamp on the team, right? He doesn't want to inherit another captain. He doesn't want to inherit all these players. I'm not saying that's the reason he sold Keane or that's the reason he sold George, but we'd be lying if there wasn't that little part of him who's like, I want to bring in my own guys. I want to be the reason this club comes up. I don't want to just inherit all these guys. So that's another tough situation, which I think we handled the best we could. We got some more profits, like we said. And it's just tough to see a fan favorite walk. I know a lot of people loved him. And then on to our kind of final piece of business. Um, just looking ahead at some transfer targets for Hull City. We've been looking at another midfielder, like Alex said, a reason George might be or is leaving is that more midfield competition is coming in. Gene Sierri. So to the up-to-date Hull City fan, you might be saying, well, talks fell through. He's not coming. But recently there's been reports that he has re-engaged with talks with our owner, and him or his agent is actually flying out to Turkey to discuss Gene Sierri coming out to play for Hull City. So as I pull up my notes on Gene Sierri, he's an ex-Fulham player who played for a good amount of time at Fulham, did well. He's a 30-year-old central midfielder, and we're very confident we can get him. We've seen George Honeyman, Tom Huddlestone, Richie Smallwood all leave, all midfielders, and we want to bring in kind of another player, obviously, and he kind of fits the bill for what we're trying to do. He's played in the championship before with Fulham, and he's experienced at 30 years old. We lost Richie Smallwood, who was a good mentor. What do you think this kind of signing could do for Hull City, Alex?
I mean, I'm always a fan of a free transfer, and I believe he's already out of contract with Fulham, right? So this would be a
Yeah,
free
yeah,
transfer.
yeah,
Bringing in experience, another body for competition in that midfield, which I think is always great. I think competition for places is important, especially in football, but also in every other sport, right? You don't want to ever have a squad that's too comfortable.
yeah,
In their roles. Obviously, like having world class players, that's different, right? But I
yeah.
think at a club like Hull, having as many guys in there who are hungry, who are going to push each other to be better, right? That's ultimately like a net positive for the team, right? And
Mhm.
so I think it's a good signing, right? Like you said, guy with experience too is going to bring that, and I think
Yeah,
it has a possibility to be, just a smart move.
I agree as well. Obviously, like we said, like to reiterate, nothing's completed yet, but he is the top target right now that we want, the top person we're looking at. And then really quickly, I also wanted to touch on kind of another thing that's fitted in. Um, a while ago, I want to say this is not a summer thing, but in May, we picked up another midfielder, Adama Traore, not the Wolves Adama Traore, but from another Turkish club. And I wanted to bring this up because he's a midfielder from another Turkish club who signed on a free transfer for 2 years. And it fits into what me and Alex have been discussing is you get rid of all these fan favorites, Richie Smallwood, Tom Huddleston, who played at Derby and Hull City, and George Honeyman, and you replace them with these new, unproven Turkish midfielders, right? So it's very clear what the owner's trying to do. He's putting his own stamp on it. He's bringing in Turkish players. He's bringing in a Gene Sierra potentially from Fulham. He's bringing in all these players. So my question is, Alex, do you think he's going too far? Do you think he's going too far to put his own stamp on the team, to make this his team, right? His team. I brought in the Turkish player. I'm paying this money for these people. I'm paying for these wages if they're on free transfers. Do you think it's too much? Do you think we would have been better off re-signing Richie, re-signing Honeyman, re-signing Keane? Do you think it's too much?
I think that's a great question, and I think, first of all, we'll see if it works, right? Because like you've said, it's such a gamble, it's such a roll of the dice.
Yep.
But I mean, I personally, maybe as an owner coming into a club, I would have done things differently, in the sense that I think, kind of embracing what the club is already, I think is something like that's something I would have done, right? But if the owner wants to do something differently, like ultimately they're the one, with the, in control of,
Exactly.
releasing funds and everything. So at the end of the day, it's up to them. We've mentioned the risk, right? And
Yeah.
so I think we'll see how it works out, and hopefully it works out well, right? Because I think the owner does have ambition, right? Which is important. And I think they're trying to fulfill that ambition in their own way, and we'll see if that way works.
I agree. I think you make a good point. I think only time will tell to see if it works out. I think another thing to think about is with these Turkish sponsors, are you only getting a Turkish sponsor who says in the contract, I want 3 Turkish players in the starting 11, something like that. I think there's a lot of things to consider about what is going on with the club right now. I'm thrilled we're spending money. I'm sad to see some old faces go. I'm thrilled to see we're getting new transfers. Are they the right purchases? I'm a little skeptical. We're gonna find out, but I'm really thrilled that I got the chance to talk about it with you, Alex. I had a great time. I think this is gonna spark the beginning of kind of the coming back of the Hypnos channel. We're gonna keep putting on great Hull City content, a lot of more stuff. I want to put out some Formula One content, some all kinds of different podcast content. Let me know if you want to see anything specific in the comments. Make sure you check out in the description Alex's podcast. Great listen. Listen to both episodes. They're all amazing. Let us know if Richarlison is a good signing. I love it. We'll see what happens. But make sure you check out the description. It's on podcasts and Spotify, post to post. Alex, do you have anything you want to say to the Hull City fans to wrap it up?
I mean, first of all, thanks again for having me. And I think in regards to Hull City, it's kind of exciting, right? Because it's this new journey that you're embarking on with this new
Sure.
ownership. And so I think the key is going to just be, results, and we'll see. I think a lot of money is going to be spent. Players are going to be brought in. Some old faces are going to go, and so I think there should be some excitement. But as you've brought up, there's going to be some skepticism as well, and so I think the ambition is there. It's just going to be about the execution. And I think it'll be interesting to keep an eye on. And I know I'm going to be keeping an eye on it for sure.
I agree. I
So
agree. It'll be very interesting for sure. I would love to have Alex back if there's some big transfer news. Um, I'll be making all kinds of Whole City videos coming up, and I think Alex will definitely be in some of them, hopefully, if he has the time. But it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. We're 4 subscribers away from 100 subscribers, so please get us there. It's been an absolute pleasure, and let us know if you want to see us talk about anything else. Thank you so much, and see ya.